So this is a video I wasn't really expecting to do, which I feel is appropriate because the material I'm actually reviewing today is also something that I just kind of checked out in the spur of the moment. More specifically last night, where it was kind of late at night, I really couldn't fall asleep, and it just dawned on me that I've tried to read Hellblazer lots and lots of times, but there is one particular story arc that a lot of Hellblazer people really love. They call it like a seminal, pivotal point in the Hellblazer, saga, so to speak. And I realized that I never fucking gave it a chance. And I was like, okay, maybe this is going to be what's going to help me become a fan of Hellblazer, because John Constantine as a character in his whole little corner of the Vertigo universe has always been something I've wanted to check out. I know Joey West is a big fan of the Hellblazer character. He's talked a lot about that guy. And conceptually wise, it's always been something that I felt like I would like. And I never did particularly well because a lot of the time I felt that the writing wasn't particularly strong and the art is just borderline horrendous a lot of the times. And when I was going into Dangerous Habits, I thought that's what was going to happen here. We were going to get lots and lots of obtuse, pointless narration, that we were going to get lots of just shitty, up-the-ass art that wasn't going to look appealing even to a blind person. And I just did not expect to have a good time with this. But this is really, really fucking good. And it really does prove, well, it disproves a lie agreed upon in the comic book fandom, so to speak, that constantly says that Spider-Man is the most relatable character of all time. And this is complete utter bullshit. The reason why it's bullshit is because John Constantine is infinitely more relatable than Spider-Man ever will be. The reason why people really like Spider-Man, and I don't think I'm even being too much of an asshole when I say this, is because Spider-Man is a self-pitying piece of shit who constantly whines about how terrible his life is. He constantly pities himself, but then he also fights supervillains. He's best friends with Captain America and the Avengers, and he fucks supermodels like Mary Jane and really hot kleptomaniacs like Black Cat. So yeah, he's a self-pitying douche nozzle who fucks supermodels and has superpowers and hangs out with the Avengers. And so, when everyone in a world where everyone likes to self-victimize themselves, of course, the epitome of self-victimization in comic books, at the very least, if not in fiction in general, would be considered the most quote-unquote relatable guy ever. But tell me this, motherfuckers. Will Spider-Man ever get lung cancer like any other normal person? No. Well, then he's not fucking relatable, and that is precisely what happens to John Constantine in this storyline. And the whole storyline is based around dealing with the fact that John Constantine has lung cancer. And it goes about it in a very human way, in a very mature way. And I don't mean mature in that, edgy, grim, dark way that, 12-year-old thinks of. It's really mature in the way that it portrays it as a real illness, something that really eats away at your body, at your soul, that really pushes you to the absolute limit, and sometimes it can even break your sanity if you let it to. And the whole story arc is John Constantine trying to come to terms with the fact that he has lung cancer, the fact that his dangerous habits, which is, well, I just made a pun, yeah, fuck off, that his dangerous habits of, drinking and predominantly smoking like 30 cigarettes per day for, at least 10 years have finally come back to bite him in the ass. And since John Constantine is a guy who deals with magic and shit, obviously he turns to magic to figure out a way how to save himself so he doesn't die because he doesn't want to die. He's done a lot of bad shit. He has sacrificed countless friends to save himself or save the world, but he's also done lots of other morally ambiguous or just downright bad things, as people do in no-win situations. And as his friends come back to haunt him, John Constantine realizes that he doesn't want to die. He knows that if he does die, he's most definitely going to burn in hell. And the whole story arc is him kind of coming to terms with it and then ultimately escaping from the clutches of death. Now, how he does this, I don't want to spoil because it's so fucking clever. It's so good, and it's such a simple twist. It's one of those story ideas where you're like, no duh, when you think about it. But when you see how it's executed, you're like, oh shit, this was really, really clever. It's like that episode of Angel where Angel Investigations deals with a possessed kid, and after they exorcise the demon from the kid, it turns out that the demon was actually trying to get out of the kid because the kid is a murderous, psychotic sociopath who's trying to murder his family, and that the demon was actually improving his state of mind. It's like that. It's like this really fucking cool twist that seems kind of like no duh, like why hasn't anybody ever done this before? But that's what it is, and I'm not gonna say it, and that is kind of like the big fuck yeah moment of the whole story arc. That is the moment where you really understand the crux of who John Constantine is and how far he's willing to go to save his own ass. And another thing I really appreciate is the narration. Now, narration is something I'm not particularly fond of in comic books. There are some guys who do it really well. There are some guys who do it to great effect to enhance the storyline. One of these guys is Scott Snyder. He uses, info dump narration for architecture or the history of Gotham or the history of clowns or how the human body works to give you a more in-depth sense of what he's describing. And a really good example of that in Scott Snyder's Batman was when he talks about how different eye movements let you know what a person is thinking and feeling, and how the Joker's a person who, hates everybody and everything except Batman. And there's nothing quite like that here, but the narration really gives you a good insight into the soul of John Constantine, where he is just a really fucked up individual, where he has this very sort of poetic but not melodramatic view of the world around him, that he is, despite the fact that he is just kind of like a school dropout and he is like an ex-punk who's like well past his youth, that he still has this really interesting view of the world around him. The world around him feels very natural. It feels like the real world where you have lots of, poverty-stricken people. You have lots of bad shit happening because bad shit always happens in the real world. And all of this feeds into one of the biggest strengths of the Hellblazer series, which is the fact that it is the real world. Like this is a universe where you're going to see not just prostitution, you're going to see like a woman who has to prostitute herself to save her, to feed her daughter, and they're going to show you the real rough realities of such a life. It's not going to be like a superhero thing where they're just going to say it and maybe show it, but they're still going to kind of like pretty it up so it's not as bad as it could potentially be. But just reading this, I can understand why this helped inspire so many more Vertigo series. I understand where Marvel Max gets its whole shtick of mature superhero stuff, where that all comes from. And it is kind of a shame that there isn't anything like this out right now. Bendis is going to re-release Jessica Jones. He's going to, make a new Jessica Jones comic book, but I don't think that's part of Marvel Max. Vertigo has just kind of lost its whole purpose as a company now that stuff like Image exists. That's really the place where you can find like creator-owned things in here. And it is a shame that we just don't have a comic book that's like this anymore. And another big thing that I want to compliment Dangerous Habits on is the fact that it isn't short. It's 5 issues long. It's like from Hellblazer issue 41 to 46. So most of the issues are about John, dealing with his lung cancer, and then the last one is a kind of epilogue that sets up the rest of Garth Ennis' run. And yeah, this is written by Garth Ennis. He, the prolific Punisher writer. So if you're a fan of Garth Ennis, well, if you're a really big fan of Garth Ennis, you probably own this. But if you're a guy who usually likes Garth Ennis and wants to check out more Garth Ennis shit, then this is definitely something you should do. And it's also pretty tame for Garth Ennis, I have to say. Like, there is blood and stuff, but it doesn't feel over the top like some Garth Ennis stuff tends to be like, which I really appreciate, because I was kind of worried what Garth Ennis would do Unchained in a book like Hellblazer, but it's really not that bad. It's more of the implications of what could happen to John Constantine in the end of the story that makes it really, really creepy and unsettling. It's not really, there's not enough gore to do that, so he just lets the implications speak for themselves. But back to my last point. The problem with comic books these days, and especially DC Rebirth stuff, is that they're really fucking short. It takes me no time to complete a DC comic these days, which could be a side effect because they have to publish them bi-weekly, so they maybe just don't have enough time to make the issues meatier. But when I started reading this, I was shocked that it actually took me a couple of hours and a few breaks to read the whole thing through. And I really appreciate that. Like, I was shocked by the fact that I was reading one issue for more than like a couple of minutes at a time. It actually took me quite a while to read them because there is a lot of narration, and the art was so surprisingly good for Hellblazer. There were moments where I was just like stopping to watch it in disbelief and thinking to myself, holy fucking shit, I'm reading a well-written Hellblazer comic book that doesn't have fucking shitty art. And that was really cool. And it is really shocking to read a comic book again that isn't going to be completely over in like a couple of minutes. So it is a really good storyline. It is a really good jumping on point for the character of John Constantine. Like, obviously, if you read stuff before this, you're going to have, you know, a better insight into what leads John to become the man you see him here. But I think that we get enough insight into his character without needing to read other pre-established material that I think it still works as a really good jumping on point. And in fact, this is the start of Garth Ennis' run on Hellblazer, which is like one of the best runs the character's ever had. So yeah, if you're someone who has tried to read Hellblazer, but you just can't get into it for various reasons, like myself, I think that this is possibly the best jumping on point, except maybe the Jamie Delano run. But the Jamie Delano run is kind of daunting because it's really, really fucking long. Like, issues take forever and ever to read. So much so that it just becomes kind of obnoxious and annoying. But this doesn't have that. I feel like the pacing here is a lot better. I feel like the art is a lot stronger here than in the Delano stuff. And if you're someone who really likes Garth Ennis, like I said, you probably should check this out. So yeah, Dangerous Habits. Really, really great stuff. I'm really glad that I'm finally having an entry point into the Hellblazer character, and I hope that the Garth Ennis run, which I'm going to keep reading, you know, from time to time and maybe reviewing, stays this good, or at least consistently well enough to keep my interest, because I'm finally entering the world of Hellblazer, baby, and I don't want to get my balls broken or, you know, get my hopes up for something that could potentially disappoint me in the end. So yeah, Dangerous Habits. Check it out. It's pretty damn awesome. Especially now, if you're fans of like the Constantine show, and you maybe want to see where that guy came from, like what are the origins of this character, I think this is a really, really good way for you to get a better insight into who John Constantine is. So yeah, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you later. Bye.